Alright, hey guys, Mr. Kyle Myers Mathematics, and let's just jump right into it. Put together a little guide on how to study for your math final. So it could be, just a semester exam, could be the final AP exam, whatever. It's usually like cumulative, so there's a lot of topics, or semi-cumulative at least. And so you're probably like, oh man, there's a lot. What do I do? What do I study? What do I focus on? And this is going to be just kind of a general guide, not class specific, but a general guide on what to do and what to prioritize. So let's go ahead and jump in. And before I jump to the next slide, the hint is that search engines are your friend. That's the first thing we're going to talk about here is Google it. Right? So, I mean, yeah, it's easy to just be like, oh, hey, like video over, Google it, that's it. But really, though, I mean, and it's not just Google, right? You could use any search engine you want, but that's the most common one of today, I guess, is Google. So Google it. I mean, Google a couple different things. Google, how to study for a math final, how to study for calculus, how to study for algebra. Google a couple different things, pull up a bunch of different links, look at videos, look at website pages, all kinds of different things, bring up all kinds of different mediums and see what you see. And I'm going to kind of let you know what I saw when I did this and what I know is like good advice versus what's out there that's bad advice that's floating around a lot. But I challenge you to do this right now. Pause the video and try it. Try to Google a bunch of stuff. So, assuming you've done that, and let's look at maybe what you found that you think is some good stuff. And I'll maybe agree with you on probably a lot of it. Right? And some of this is just general stuff, right? Like well-being, sleep well. If you're teenage, young 20s, usually 8, at least 7. It also depends on how much you're exercising as well. If you're exercising a lot, you need more sleep. If you're exercising not as much, well, hopefully you're exercising a good amount at least. But 7 to 8 hours is a good amount to try to shoot for. And of course, eating healthy. So obviously that can look like a bunch of different things, but generally speaking, vegetables are good for you. Don't have to be all vegetables. You don't have to go, full vegan necessarily. I won't get too much into diet because I know that's a sticky topic to get into, but vegetables are good for you. Bacon it tastes good, but it's not great in large copious quantities. Or like, let's say breakfast food, right, before the test. Because a lot of times that's when you're going to take your test, right? It's going to be like mid-morning, early afternoon, probably. So breakfast. An egg or two, probably fine. More than 2, probably not. As far as heaviness, it gets a little heavy. I would stay away from, pancakes and waffles and stuff. Even if they're whole grain, it's still floury, and it's just not that great. If you wanted to do like some whole grain oats, that sort of thing, like some oatmeal, without too much added sugar. I just do oats straight, and I add a little bit of like sugar to sweeten the taste. But some things like that, right, would be good. Fruits, but not high sugary fruits like cherries, maybe. Just things like that. And then, of course, exercise, right? So, again, this is just general stuff. Sleep well, eat healthy, exercise. And then let's get into the math specific stuff, right? So, practicing math. We'll get more into exactly what to do and how to practice that in a second. But practice. That's the best, tangible way you can get better. Not by going over your notes over and over and over again. Not by watching a ton of videos on somebody else doing problems. Do the problems. Start with easier versions of the problems, and then just try to work out harder and harder examples as you're able to. Practice, practice, practice. That's the key there. And then flashcards. because formulas are a thing, and sometimes some questions are set up to where if you don't know the formula, you're just stuck. There's just no way out. There's not a good plan B. You either know it or you don't, kind of thing. So you don't want to get stuck with that and not know the formula, because then you're just stuck. You're not going to get it right unless it's multiple choice, and then you got roughly a 25% chance. So you want to know your formulas, and you do that with either paper flashcards or online flashcards, and we'll get more into that in the next few slides. Study partner. Okay, accountability is actually a great thing. The military does this pretty well. When you go into the military, you have to go through boot camp, and when you go through boot camp, you're training with a bunch of other people. You guys are surviving boot camp together. Okay, if you went through boot camp by yourself, each individual went through boot camp by themselves, there wouldn't be as much of a pass rate. More people get through boot camp because they're training together and they're able to hold each other accountable and lift each other up and be like, nah, you got this. One more set, one more pull, one more push up. That sort of thing. So, study with a study partner. Not necessarily all the time together, especially if you're an introvert. But keep accountable with somebody. Like, talk to somebody and be like, hey, like, I'm gonna check in with you every day, and we're gonna make sure we did what we said we were gonna do, right? And then of course there's tutoring, right? So tutoring is sort of like somebody who comes alongside you and they're like, hey, let's talk about all this stuff. Let's set up a plan. Let's get into action. Let's go through the math topics. Let's figure out easy ways to remember the things that are on your flashcards that you need to know anyways. And you can, study and learn and do all these things. So tutoring is a great way to do that, because a good tutor will know how to meet you where you're at and get you to where you need to go. All right, so definitely worth looking into that as well. Okay, bad advice. And also, other good advice is out there. Those were the key takeaways. So there's some other stuff out there too, but I was like, eh. So, bad advice. Study your notes. This is good advice for other classes. If you looked up how to study, just in general, people will tell you, oh, look over your notes. And that can be helpful. Not that it's not ever helpful in math class, but it's largely just a waste of your time. The only thing you need your notes for is the formulas and maybe some example problems. But that's it. Don't get caught up in, what's the technical definition of how to take a derivative. It's like, oh, it's d dx of a. I'm trying to remember the technical. It's d dx of x to the n power equals nx to the n minus 1 power. Right? Like, nobody remembers power rule like that. Okay, and if you're not in calculus, I'm sorry, that was a bad example for you. But nobody remembers that. Okay? Or like the rule for, I don't know, like how to graph things, slope and that sort of thing. It can be confusing. Formulas and rules can be confusing. You got to know the formulas, you got to memorize them, but by themselves, they're not helpful. You got to use them. Right? So just memorizing the formulas is not going to be helpful. It's going to be helpful if you do it along with practice, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. Teaching someone else. I've seen this one floating around, and I agree with it on a general level, but if you're trying to practice for your final and you don't feel like you've got it yet, don't try to teach it to somebody else. Right? You don't want to put that on them. For one, like, if you don't understand something and you're trying to teach it to somebody else, yeah, you might start to get it a little better yourself, but you might also teach that person some wrong stuff. And you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to learn a little bit at the expense of somebody else. That's not ethical, right? So if you're going to teach somebody else, I'm down for that. I am. I do it for a living. But wait till you've got it yourself first. Wait till you've passed the class. Wait till you've gotten an A in the class. maybe a high B. Wait till you've done well in class, and then try to teach it to somebody else afterwards, right? Especially if you're taking the next math class up and the next math class up, and you keep using and strengthening that algebra 1 class. Like if you're in calculus 1 or above, you could probably teach somebody else algebra 1 pretty confidently because you know it pretty well by now if you're in calculus 1. But I wouldn't recommend teaching somebody algebra 1 if you yourself are studying for your algebra 1 test. It's just not a good idea, right? It's not good for them. And then for you, it kind of stresses you out too, because you're like, oh, hey, you got to do this. And it just feels forced, right? It's just. So don't do it. Don't do it, right? It's not a good way to study. Teaching somebody else helps you to understand it better yourself. That's true. But just no. Okay? And then this whole treat yourself thing, right? So I love Parks and Rec. I learned that phrase from Parks and Rec, and it's hysterical, but Tom was not a role model when he was quoting that statement. He ended up redeeming himself at the end of Parks and Rec, but he was not a role model for like 90% of the show. Not somebody to try to to strive for. And then of course you have Donna, which she has an interesting character, and so it's a little hard to delve into that. But overall, here's what I'm trying to say. There's plenty of ways to extrinsically motivate yourself out there. I mean, even your grade is an extrinsic motivator. You don't actually have to assign a grade to what you do. You could just do it, right? You could just do math for no other reason than to just do math, right? That's a possibility, but most people do math either for the grade or to teach somebody else. Or, for applications purposes, like, engineering and whatnot. But if you're getting a grade, that's an extrinsic motivator right there. If you're going to treat yourself with, I don't know, candy, or letting yourself, drink something that you really like to drink, or eat something you like to eat, or, if you like to exercise, waiting to go out for a bike ride or something until after you've done your homework. Those can be helpful, but it's just when you tell yourself that you're going to withhold something until you're done with your math, it kind of doubles down on you thinking that math is this yucky thing that you have to get out of the way before you can do the fun thing, right? And so then it kind of diminishes it even further, right? So you might not like math, and that's fine, but if you are telling yourself, oh, well, I'll get to do this fun thing if I do this math first, then you're kind of doubling down on the math not being fun, and you don't want to double down on it, right? If you already don't like math, you don't need to make it worse in your head, right? It's like a mind game. So don't treat yourself, right? Just do it. Just slowly build up the self-discipline, right? Self-discipline is hard, but if you keep trying, if you keep practicing, you keep trying to be self-disciplined and just do it without, some sort of carrot at the end of the stick, so to speak, then it will be better for you in the long run. Okay, now, here are the exact steps. This is the last slide I have here. There's a lot here, so you can pause it and shut me up for a second and read through it if you like, but I'm going to kind of walk you through it here. Okay, where to start? You start with your study partner. Start with that person. They could be in your actual class, or they could just be somebody else that that's taking that class. You can, ask around, your social media. Go onto your social media, ask around, see who else might be taking the class at the same time. If you don't know anybody that can kind of meet these requirements, but basically, here's what this person needs to do for you, and you for them. You guys need to check in with each other every day. Okay, you got to set up a practice schedule with them, figure out what you're going to practice and when. Okay, and then check in with each other, make sure you did it. Okay, and then if you want to, this would be back to the extrinsic treat yourself kind of thing. But you can check in with each other and say like, okay, what are we going to do if somebody doesn't, do their studying that day? It might be enough just the shame of it. Like, oh yeah, I didn't do the studying today. It's like, oh, well, you messed up, right? That could be enough. That could be enough, just the shame of it. But maybe it's not for you. So maybe you do need to come up with some sort of thing like, oh, like if I don't do the studying, then I need to have this bad thing happen. And if I do, then I need to have this good thing happening. So if you need that crutch, maybe dabble a little bit. But again, back to what I was saying before, you gotta be self-motivated. You gotta have that self-control. So you want to just check in with each other and have that be enough. The shame of not being able to get it done that day, or the glory of, yes, I did it and I crushed it and I feel like I'm like 10 times smarter at this subject already. Okay, need that person that you can check in with every day, that you can either study with or just check in individually and just like call them up or text them or whatever and just be like, oh, hey, how'd you do? I did, blank, blank, and blank today. Okay, even just that would be fine, right? If you're more of an introvert, that's cool. If you're more of an extrovert, then find somebody else who's an extrovert and study with them and try to study with them every day. Now, it's going to be a little harder to do that if it's online. You can do, Zoom and things like that. If you're further away from each other or whatever. But try to meet up every day if you're more of an extrovert and play to your strengths. If you're more of an introvert, then at least check in with each other. Okay. Once you've secured your study partner, right, you have to do step 1 first. You've got to secure that study partner first. If you haven't done step 1, if you're just watching this video right now and you're not taking action on this and you need to, don't go on to step 2. Don't do step 2 until you've done step 1. I'm serious. Find that study partner first. Pause the video right now. Text all your people that you know are in the class and you have their numbers, and find that person like now. At least text people before moving on to step 2, right? And when those responses start to come in, see who can do that for you, okay? And you for them, right? Two-way street. All right, but once you've done that, step 2, what's next? Formulas. Okay, before you start studying, secure those formulas. This has to get done because you may or may not know exactly what formulas will be given to you. Maybe you know that none will be given to you. That's fine. At least you know where you stand. What's worse is when the teacher's like, oh, I might give you some formulas on the test. Well, it's like, well, are you or not? Right? Like, obviously don't ask them that way. That would be rude. But, ask them in class, like, are there any formulas that we know for sure will be given to us for the test? Right? And, in full hearing of the rest of the class, that way if they don't come through, then everybody knows about it, right? So, and even better, maybe like in an email your teacher, something like that, right? But find out for sure. Find out for sure which ones will be given, what will be given, and what won't be given, right? Then when you know what won't be given to you on the test, you got to start putting together 3x5s and Quizlet cards. This is when it would be helpful to look back at the notes to try to find some of those formulas, okay? The other thing you can do too is just go to Quizlet, type in the name of your class, and then type in like final exam review or something like that. Just literally go to Quizlet and like Google it, right? Like go into the search bar and just Google, let's say you're in geometry final exam review, or semester 1 exam review, right? So do that. Find those cards, and then copy them into a folder, like one of your own folders. So if you don't have a sign-in account yet for Quizlet, it's free. Go ahead and go in and make one. You can use Study Blue as well. There's a few that are like out there, but I like Quizlet the best. So, and I don't get any money for saying that. I just like them. So you go in and put it in a folder and then tweak it, right? So if there might be some extra cards in there. If you find a deck that has like 100 cards, you're probably not going to need all 100. Well, for geometry maybe. But go in and tweak it, right? So go in and tweak it, especially if you know your teacher's going to like define something a certain way and they didn't define it the same exact way. Like tweak it a little bit. But that would be less work than starting from scratch, right? Unless you prefer to start from scratch, and then go ahead, right? Which is what you'd have to do if you do paper 3x5 cards, okay? But when you're doing your paper 3x5 cards, write them out and have them with you, okay? So once you've secured all your formulas, okay? And again, I'm going to say this again. If you didn't do step 2, do step 2 right now before you go on to step 3. If you need to pause this video for 10, 20 minutes at a time, I'm fine with that. Okay, pause it, make your 3x5 cards, go into Quizlet or go, grab some paper 3x5 cards and write out all of your formulas. Okay. Oh, the other thing too is sometimes you're allowed to have your formulas in your calculator. You can do that too. Assuming you're allowed to have them in your calculator, right? So I would check just to make sure you can, but go ahead and do that. And yeah. So okay, on to step 3. Assuming you've gotten your formulas down, do your practice problems. Right. So you have to find them first, right? So search for worksheets, right? Literally just Google, right? Just Google worksheets. Google like Algebra 2 imaginary numbers worksheet. And then you can type in KUTA, K-U-T-A. They have a lot of good worksheets if you want some worksheets that are pretty good and they have the answers in them all the time. Watch some YouTube videos. And what I mean is don't just watch to watch, but like do the YouTube videos where they work through practice problems with you and then pause it at the beginning before they start working out the problem and try to work out the problem yourself. And then if you get stuck or whatever, then you'll get stuck, right? So you'll be like watching the video then and trying to figure it out. Okay. Then you're going to use websites like, Khan Academy, Paul's Online Math Notes. Those are some good places there to find some problems. You're going to find problems, all right? So step 3 isn't working out the problems yet. It's just finding problems. Find a ton of different places where problems exist, okay? And make sure, the answers are in there. So if it's a video, then they're going to work through to the answer. If it's a worksheet, you want to check to make sure they have the answers. It's not going to make any sense if they don't have the answers, okay? And then lastly, okay, here's what you actually do, right? You're going to practice every day, right? Take a rest day, at least an hour, okay? If you can't manage an hour, then, whatever, but that's what I recommend. 6 days, an hour a day, okay? If you're really serious about acing the test, you got to put in a good amount of practice every day. You just got to. I mean, if you can't do it, do what you can. But that's what I would recommend, okay? Also, you would want to pull up your practice problems from step 3, pull up your note cards from step 2, okay? Have both of those things pulled up, ready to go. Then when you start the clock and you start working on your practice problems, try to remember the formulas at first. If you can't, that's fine. Pull up the formula sheet, flip through your cards until you find the right formula. And then if you have the formula, use the formula and then solve the problem. And if you don't have the formula, hey, that means you missed one, right? So that's good and bad, I guess. Kind of good, mostly good, because you can just, make the card real quick. Have a few blank ones ready to go. Or in Quizlet, make that extra card real quick as you need to. And go ahead and make those cards if you need to make any extra ones, but try to remember the formula first, really try. And then if you can't remember it, flip through your cards, right? And that'll help you to remember things, all your cards, really, because if you're flipping through all your cards or if you're flipping through Quizlet, you'll see all the different formulas and you'll have to flip through them until you find the formula that you're looking for. And then you'll use the formula and it'll help you to remember the formulas because you got to anyways, right? Those are the formulas that you won't be given. So use the formulas and the questions at the same time as you're studying. All right. And that's my advice for today. If this was helpful at all, I have a free guide called The 5 Math Mistakes Everyone Makes and How to Avoid Them. It's on my website, myersmathematics.com. And I hope to see you in another episode real soon.